Morning. It is Thursday, April the 7th, and this is The Drill. Welcome to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. I'm Ron, your host and the only true conservative in the United States today. So today, after the Daily Declaration for Spiritual Warfare, the Pledge of Allegiance, and the Star-Spangled Banner, we will have no free lunch, and we will return for World Series Game 1 in the book My Bicentennial Year. All that and more when I get back. Thank you. And now, Daily Declarations for Spiritual Warfare, Biblical Principles to Defeat the Devil. For April 7th, the wicked will be destroyed by the fire of God. I will avenge the attack of the enemy against my righteous servants with the fire of my vengeance. I will rain down coals of fire and brimstone against the wicked. When you walk through the enemy's fire, you will not be burned, and the flame of the enemy's attack will not scorch you. I will kindle my fire in you, and it shall devour all the dryness that comes into your life. All your enemies will see that I have kindled it, and it shall not be quenched. My devouring fire will go before you, and the flame of my righteousness will burn behind you. Psalm 140, verse 10, Isaiah chapter 43, verse 2, Ezekiel chapter 20, verse 47 and 48, Joel chapter 2, verse 3. Prayer declaration, I will not fear the enemy's flames or run when the enemy attacks. My Lord will rain down the fire of his vengeance upon them. He will place his holy flame of righteousness within my heart, and it will devour all dry and useless places within me. It will go before and behind me, and it shall never be quenched. Amen. And that is the Daily Declaration for Spiritual Warfare for April the 7th. Thank you. Who is the true conservative? He is religious and realistic. He is the person that understands that culture is the foundation for politics. He acknowledges a benevolent universe. He is patriotic and uses common sense. He makes judgments, refuses to speculate, speaks clearly and definitively, and is not afraid to say no. He's open-minded, asking why rather than why not. He is consistent, credible, and influential, not ashamed of his existence, unafraid to learn or correct his mistakes. He is a normal American. Thank you, thank you. What is the true conservative strategy for defeating socialists in this country? Number one, we must properly define conservatism. Then we must organize all potential conservatives under that definition. Once organized, we must dominate American culture. Dominating American culture means that we must rid ourselves of all the various cults the left has foisted upon us in this country. We rid ourselves of the left-wing cults by promoting value. What are the universal values? Number one, life. Number two, privacy. Number three, time. Number four, sanity. Number five, productivity. We defeat promiscuity by promoting family and privacy. Socialists must be driven from positions of power. And since it is lefty counterculture that provides the foundation for their political success, true conservatives must resist left-wing counterculture and promote normal American culture. By changing our culture, we will change our politics. And we change the culture by getting married, creating a family, and raising our children. Thank you, thank you. What are the tactics in support of the strategy to rid America of socialist influence? The long-term tactics are to be a true conservative, talk like a conservative, act like a conservative, dress like a conservative, think like a conservative. The short-term tactics are rhetorical. True conservatives need to win all of the arguments. True conservatives need to defeat the useful idiots on the left that populate their households, workplaces, and churches. That means don't be neutral. Don't try to prove a negative. Don't take their word for it, and ask lots of questions. The useful idiots are the people that simply repeat the latest talking points. Thank you, thank you. What are the true conservative political priorities? Number one, the abolition of abortion throughout the land. Number two, make nuclear, chemical, and biological weapons obsolete. Number three, the immediate decertification of all public employee unions. Number four, the immediate assignment of criminal and civil liabilities to all government regulators. Number five, the immediate repeal of the so-called Patriot Act. Number six, the immediate repeal of all emergency dictator laws. Number seven, the reinstatement of writs of outlawry. Number eight, government-sponsored recalls, ballot initiatives, and referendums. 9, a flexible minimum wage. And 10, means-tested health care. Thank you, thank you. What are the true conservative cultural priorities? Bring back not-for-profit news. Number 2, destroy the cult of promiscuity. Replace with an emphasis on privacy. Number 3, destroy the cult of neutrality with the effective use of propaganda. Number 4, destroy the cult of personality by emphasizing character. Number 5, destroy the cult of imagination, psychologists, and Hollywood. Number 6, destroy the cult of reinvention by admitting your mistakes. Thank you, thank you. The biggest mistakes that right-wing talk show hosts make. Number 1, they fail to consult their consciences. Number 2, they fail to listen to their own shows. Number 3, they aid and abet the left. Number 4, they demoralize their audiences. Number 5, they contradict themselves. Thank you, and now there's no free lunch. Quote, "The fact that our self-regard finds expression in a desire for approval offers an opening for moral education, for moderating both our passions and our animal appetites to make civilized life possible. This is the beginning of social order and of self-restraint, and so the first impulse to moral conformity and common social norms." Unquote. Yuval Levine. The requirement of a moral landscape in an open economy is, unfortunately, at odds with the reality of fallen human nature, and yet norms, institutions, and traits exist that can, all at once, benefit from man's moral advancement and facilitate more of the same. The moderation of sinful instincts not only creates greater communion for man with God, but it makes possible the social order in which virtue can lead to prosperity. And that was There's No Free Lunch. Thank you. And now, my Bicentennial Year, which is a book about growing up in Gansevoort, New York, in 1975, more specifically from the summer of 1975 until the summer of 1976. And it's told from the perspective of one of the kids named Mike, who lives on 4th Street in Gansevoort. And when we left the story, Mike and his friends on 4th Street have challenged the kids from 3rd Street to a baseball game that they have nicknamed Game 1. This one will be Game 1 of the World Series. So we're now at Chapter 7, the World Series, Game 1 of the Fall Classic. On the bus to and from school all week, the talk was of the World Series Game 1 on Friday after school. The verbal jostling between the two streets was reaching a fever pitch by the time Friday rolled around. When we got off the bus on Friday after school, we ran like the wind to our houses with fast instructions to get changed ASAP, eat, and meet in my backyard. We needed to practice before our dads got home, and the game started. The moms on 4th Street had agreed to serve supper right after school so that we could get started practicing right away. For all we knew, the moms on 3rd Street never ever served supper. Anytime the supper call came out when we were out, it came from the 4th Street moms. We asked old TJ about it, and he said just that they ate whenever they wanted. Whatever they wanted. Whatever, we said. We all managed to get to the field by 4:15 or so. This was great timing because we arrived home on the bus just after 3:45. We were going into the game with what we thought was an unbeatable lineup. Batting first and playing second base would be Brad. Batting second and playing center field would be me. Batting third and playing shortstop would be Huge Gene. Batting fourth and playing first base was Russ. Batting fifth and playing third base was Mike C. Batting sixth and playing left field was my sister Kathy. Batting seventh and playing right field was the demented Tommy Garshammer. Last but not least, batting eighth and playing catcher was good old Lee Harvey. When your dads are the all-time pitchers and umps, it allows for some flexibility in who plays where. It also thoroughly diminishes the roles and responsibilities of the catcher position. We were kind of thinking this way in regards to our lineup. Brad hitting first because if he did hit the ball, he was fast and could take a normal single and make it into a triple. We put him as second base because he was a good fielder, but mostly because Huge Gene insisted that no one besides his brother was going to play second if he was a shortstop. They both consider themselves to be smaller versions of Davy Concepcion and Joe Morgan of the Big Red Machine. We figured for me batting second was as good a place as any. I was either going to clock it and watch it go out of the yard, or like Dave Kingman, I would strike out. As far as me playing center field went, I had a cannon for an arm and could throw it all the way to home plate from deep out in the field. With Big Huge Gene batting third, we figured he was a good bet to get a hit, and either Brad would already be home for my deep ball or at second or third from his hit, not moving after I struck out. That Gene's sure hit would score our first or second run. Now came the reason for Russ hitting fourth. Fourth was supposed to be your big guy, your surefire hit-it-deep guy. In games we played with just us kids, he was like Jim Rice, deep and far. Sometimes, though, when the dads played with us and all-time pitchers, Big Russ had a tougher time with it. Russ playing first base was an easy choice. He could catch a ball pretty well, and being older and bigger than us, he made a good target, as my dad used to say, for us smaller kids to throw at. Mike C. playing third base for us was an easy choice. He loved third base, and that's all he wanted to play. He would stand out there bent over with his hands on his knees and make a loud vacuum sound. Then he would start his glove and hand in a vacuum motion in between whirs, yelling that he was just like Brooks Robinson, a vacuum at third base, sucking up all in the hot corner. He was okay at it and liked it, so why bother to change it? As far as hitting fifth, why not? He was just as good or as bad as the rest of us, and we were hoping he could start a rally after Big Russ cleared the bases on all his home runs. My sister Kathy playing left field and batting sixth. Hey, we needed another player. Quite honestly, although I would never tell her this, she was just as good as or better than all of us. That left us Tommy G playing right field and batting seventh. We just didn't know about Tommy. Sometimes when he played with us, he was a team guy. He tried hard and made some good plays. Other times it would have been better if he did not play at all. He played with an attitude, would start yelling at us and the other team, went out to right field and sat on his glove or swung the bat like a tomahawk at us, not the ball. But we hoped for the best with him. This was, after all, the World Series. Then there was good old Lee Harvey. He was short. He had no speed. He could not catch the ball. He could not hit the ball. He could not throw the ball. He could, however, get hit by the ball. We figured, why not catcher? At least he could act a good backstop for Mr. Tidwell pitching. Old Lee really had a heart, though. He was our biggest cheerleader. He got enthused. Back in a minute. Thank you. The Third Streeters had a scary lineup. No, I don't mean scary like we can't beat these guys. I mean scary like to look at. They were mutants. Batting first and playing third base was the head mutant himself, Bobby Donlin. Batting second and playing third base was old Willie Puddin. Batting third and playing shortstop was Billy Puddin. The Pudding brothers were identical twins, and they looked like pudding, short and roly. But they were good ball players, and of all the Third Streeters, the most easy to take. Batting fourth and playing first base was Bobby's older sister, June. That's right, their version of Jim Rice. Their biggest threat to go deep was Bobby's sister, June. And boy, did she look the part. She was bigger than all of us, including Russ. And she was strong. You could just see that she was strong. She actually had muscles, unlike all of us. You knew that if you were ever in a fight with her, you would lose, and lose big. She was also the only Third Streeter we ever saw giving Bobby a hard time. Batting fifth and playing center field was none other than Chris Fartwell. Batting sixth and playing left field was Timmy O'Toole. And yes, he was a tool. If you hadn't already guessed, Timmy was Irish, and very Irish at that. Red hair and white as a ghost. Apparently in Ireland you never saw the sun, because his whole family was white, and his mom told us that it was because it always rained and they never got along well with the sun. His mom, in an effort to help him fit in, I guess, at the beginning of the summer, made him get an afro. Yes, an afro. Now, I don't know what neighborhood Mrs. O'Toole thought she lived in, but this is not an afro neighborhood. We honestly felt bad. Timmy, instead of fitting in, looked like a big red poodle with white legs. The poor guy. By the time school rolled around, it had straightened out, mostly. Batting seventh and playing right field was J.J. Gooden. In reality, he should have been called J.J. Baden. He was absolutely the worst player either team had. He was worse than our Lee Harvey. At least Lee had heart. It wasn't all J.J.'s fault, though. He had severe asthma and always had to stop and catch his breath and breathe from some kind of a spray can. Batting eighth and playing catcher was old T.J. Belly Button Picker Fartwell. My father and Mr. Tidwell were spotted coming around the corner of the house. They proceeded directly to the pitcher's mound. They called us all to the mound. Mr. Tidwell stood on top of the mound, raised his hand, and then his finger in the air. He was by nature a big man. To us, with him standing on top of the mound, his arm raised, he looked about 12 feet tall. His mustache was almost the handlebar type, but not quite. He started to growl at us. "Boys," he said, "listen up. There will be absolutely, and I repeat absolutely, no fighting, no cheating of any kind, or this game is over immediately. No whiners. Do I make myself clear?" "Yes," we yelled back. My dad spoke up. "We will play 5 innings. I will call the outs at home and third, and whether or not a ball is fair or foul, Mr. Tidwell will call the others at first or second. We will not call balls and strikes, but you can strike out by swinging and missing the ball on strike 3. Everybody understand?" "Yes," we all yelled back. "We will flip this coin to see who hits first and last." This was not just any coin. It was Mr. Tidwell's special John F. Kennedy silver dollar. And with anything Kennedy in the mid-70s being Catholic, this was somehow a relic, a piece of wonderment bestowed on Mr. Tidwell for some good deed. Anyhow, we were amazed he was breaking it out for us. This must be a special game. Mr. Tidwell looked over at Bobby and said, "You the leader of this band of Third Streeters?" Bobby said he guessed so. "Good," said Mr. Tidwell. "Call this in the air and you can choose to hit first or last, being as this game is not being held on your street." With that said, he made a fist with his thumb on top and placed a JFK silver dollar on top of thumb. He raised the hand in air and flicked the coin way up in the air while at the same time yelling to Bobby, call it in the air." Bobby yelled out, "Tails, tails." Down came the coin, rolling over itself in the air. It hit the rubber in the pitcher's mound hard and bounced sailing towards second base. Mr. Tidwell, my dad, and all of us went chasing after it. Mr. Tidwell darted ahead of us with his hands out to the side to keep us from it. Back up, boys," he and my father both yelled out. My father got closer to it, leaned down and yelled, "Heads it is. You lose, Donlin." I yelled. My dad immediately reprimanded me to be a good sport instead of rubbing it in. Mike C., who was ready to get started, screamed out, "Let's take the field, guys. We want last ups." And with that, we ran to our positions, and the Third Streeters were up first. Mr. Tidwell took the mound asked around if we were ready, and began his wind-up. Bobby, who was up first, backed out of the batter's box, raising his back hand to call time to my father, the ump. My dad yelled, "Time out," and Mr. Tidwell stopped his motion. "What's the matter, Bobby? We just got started." Bobby looked around at us and back at my dad. He pointed his bat at Mr. Tidwell and said, "How do I know you're going to pitch me and my guys the same as you are your kids? I bet you pitch us hard and them nice and slow so they can hit it." Back in a minute. Thank you. Now we knew different than what Bobby was thinking. I suppose if it was Mr. Fartwell pitching to us, we might feel the same way. But we knew that if anything, Mr. Tidwell would favor the mutants, and my dad would call us out quicker than the mutants. That was just the way it was. We had to earn it. Mr. Tidwell looked around at all of us, looked back at Bobby and my dad, and said, "Bobby, you have seen me and Mike's father around town and around here. Have you ever seen us screw somebody or be mean to anyone? Now come on, batter up." Bobby shook his head no and climbed back into the batter's box, his face all red. I think he psyched himself out. The Third Streeters were all yelling, "Come on, Bobby," and we were all yelling, "Swing, batter, swing." Before you knew it, it had turned into a shouting match, not a baseball game. Bobby was getting all mad now. His face turned all red, his bloodshot eyes were bulging out of his head, and snot was running out of his nose. He stood there swinging the bat in practice, waiting for the first pitch. He took one more practice swing and then placed his bat on the base, looked up, and was ready for the first pitch. Once more, Mr. Tidwell was ready to go. He asked Bobby one more time if he was ready. Bobby nodded back, okay. Mr. Tidwell wound up and sent the first pitch of the 1975 World Series on its way. The ball went fast and straight down the middle of the plate, a classic fastball. Not that any of us would have known the difference in pitches that could have been a curveball for all we knew. Bobby's eyes lit up. His hands clenched the bat, and he lifted his front foot and took a mighty swing. And swing Bobby did. He swung so hard that after missing the ball, he kept spinning right around in a circle, almost driving himself like a corkscrew into the dirt. Lee Harvey, our catcher, had all the equipment on. The mask, the helmet, the chest protector, the shin guards, all of it. It's a pretty good thing he did. As the ball went past Bobby's swing, Lee put up his catcher's mitt expecting the ball to go in it. Instead, the ball hit Lee right in the catcher's mask and stuck in the mask between the upper and lower grids of the mask, coming oh so close to Lee's face. Lee stood up in amazement, that one. He had caught the ball, and two, that he had escaped death. Bobby was still spinning both himself and the bat around in circles. As Lee stood up, he moved a little forward, which allowed Bobby's spinning bat to catch Lee in the back of the head, hitting his helmet, of course, knocking Lee forward, and his face and ball slammed into home plate. We all knew it. For a split second, Lee Harvey had died. I could see the headlines in the Post-Star newspaper. Tragedy at the World Series. Local boy dies from missed hit fastball. The next split second was all I could do not to feel sorry for us. We just got the game going, and on the first pitch, it was over because Lee Harvey was dead. Back in a minute. Thank you. My father reached over and pulled Lee up, who was so shocked he had not had time to cry. He dusted off Lee and told him he was okay, and surprisingly enough, Lee agreed. He was okay. The game would go on. Mr. Tidwell yelled at us all to knock off the yelling and let Lee and Bobby concentrate. My dad unwedged the ball from Lee's face mask and threw it back to Mr. Tidwell. Mr. Tidwell suggested to Lee and to TJ that if they wanted to not catch the ball, just let it go to the backstop. No reason to die for going for a baseball, he said. Mr. Tidwell went into his windup for the second pitch of the World Series. This pitch, we could all tell, was a lot slower than the first. Bobby smiled as he began his swing. He connected and hit towards Mike C. at third. It was a hot shot grounder headed right at Mike C. You could see his eyes bug out of his head as it came towards him. Mike C. lowered himself in front of the ball and caught it. He threw it right to Russ. 1 out. The Pudding brothers went out easy. The first one was a deep fly ball to me in center. The second was a pop fly to Brad at second. The game went back and forth like this until the fifth and final inning of the game, or of game one. Mr. Tidwell must have felt pretty proud of himself at this point. No hitting a bunch of 10-year-olds. At the top of the fifth, with Chris Fartwell up, Mr. Tidwell and my dad switched places. Apparently Mr. Tidwell felt he could slow the ball down enough for us to hit it and still get it over the plate. My father pitched a slow, arching, chest-high ball to Chris. We could all see Chris smiling. He reached back, and a mighty swing. The ball came off his bat and was a deep pop-up, only the second one in my area for the whole game. I had my eyes right on it. I was drifting a little left, kept my feet under it, running in on it. This was mine. Just as I was about to make the catch, I heard footsteps and noise of Tommy Garshammer rushing in. I started yelling, I got it, back off, I got it. My yelling was to no avail. Tommy was charging me. I was charging the ball. Tommy and I collided at full speed. We both went into each other like rams. We fell to the ground hard. I think we both passed out. I woke up to huge Gene screaming at us to get the ball, and throw it in. It's right in front of you. Get it, throw it in. I quickly regained consciousness, bleary-eyed, everything blurry as I made out the shape of the ball right next to me. Gene at this point was running toward me. I grabbed the ball and was ready to heave it to Gene when I saw Chris running. Chris by this time was rounding second, heading towards third. I knew I had a good arm, so I ignored my cutoff man, Gene, a major sin for an outfielder, and threw the ball toward Mike C. covering third base as Chris was heading towards him at full speed. I could see Chris looking at me and getting worried that he would be out at third, but alas, he had nothing to worry about. The ball went sailing over Mike C.'s head and out into Lee Harvey's backyard. The Third Streeters were up 1-0 over us. Chris, thanks to me and Tommy, hit an inside-the-park home run. The Third Streeters were screaming for joy, running towards Chris as he crossed home plate. We started yelling back, calm down, the game's not over. Bobby loved that comment. He came back with, yeah, neither is the inning. We can still score more. Timmy O'toole was up next. He popped out to huge Gene. TJ Belly Button Picker was up now. TJ was the smallest kid on the field. Lee Harvey was maybe an inch taller. He stood in the box, back on his shoulder and finger in his nose. He took his finger out of his nose, placed his hands on the bat, and was now ready. My dad threw him 3 straight slow pitches, which should have been easy to hit, but TJ swung through all 3 of them. You're out. 2 down, yelled Mr. Tidwell. Back in a minute. Thank you, thank you. Now, Bobby Donlin was up again. He was feeling all cocky. You could tell. He thought with my dad pitching, he was going to be able to bomb it. He stood in the box, nodded he was ready. My dad reared back. No longer was he throwing the slow balls like he was to TJ. My dad let her rip right down the middle, and the swinging corkscrew was back. Bobby missed it about 4 times. My dad apologized to Bobby that it was a little fast. He wound up and threw one a little slower, right again, right down the middle. Bobby caught up to this one and hit a hard line drive right at Big Russ. Russ stuck out his glove, and lo and behold, the ball stuck right in it. I think Russ had his eyes closed, but either way, the ball was caught. 3 outs, bottom of the 5th, 3rd Streeters 1, 4th Streeters nothing, yelled Mr. Tidwell. We all ran in like a swarm of bees, buzzing with excitement. My so-called teammates were yelling at me that I caused the run to score. It was my fault. I was screaming at Tommy, Tommy at me, Gene at me, everybody at me. I yelled back, wait a second, I called it. Tommy was supposed to back off. This cry went on deaf ears. They were all blaming me. I guess now 30 years later, I will take the blame for that run, but still, if you call it, the other guy has to back off. Okay, maybe I can't take the blame even 30 years later. My dad yelled at us to quit fighting. You're all on the same team. Play smart. All you need is 1 run to stay in it, 2 to win. Suck it up and pull together, he yelled. Mike C. was up first for us. Mike's game playing nickname was not one he liked. We all called him Buggy. He got that because in football, if Mike was about to catch it, his eyes grew wide and large like a bug right out of his sockets. In baseball, the same thing happened to him right before he hit a ball and right before he caught a ball. My dad threw the first pitch. Buggy's eyes grew large and he was in the zone. He swung at the pitch with all of his might. Buggy came through for us. He cracked a line drive right up the middle. Chris Fartwell got to it after it bounced way behind second base. He threw it to second with Mike C. coming towards the base. Mike C. was in with what should have been a stand-up double. But at 10 years old, you slide no matter what, just for the fun of it. So Mike C. slid into second base, and then an hour or so later, Chris's throw from way behind second made it into Willie Puddin. My sister Kathy was up next. My dad whizzed 2 pitches right by her, which she missed badly. 2 strikes. The next pitch, Kathy connected on. She hit a hot grounder to Bobby at third. He got to it quick, caught it, and threw to Big June at first. Kathy ran, stretched out. Mr. Tidwell was following her down the line at first. The call was safe. Our bench erupted in cheers. Bobby screamed with a fury only a cheated-on 10-year-old could muster. See, I told you your parents would cheat. She was out. Mr. Tidwell stopped in his tracks, looked at Bobby with a death stare, walked over to him, bent down, and whispered in his ear. To this day, we don't know what he said to Bobby, but he apologized and headed back to third with his tail between his legs. Back in a minute. Thank you. We were psyched. No outs, 2 men on. Tommy Garshammer was up. He looked at the pitch, was about to swing, then he pulled up and bunted. It was a perfect bunt, slowly rolling in front of home plate. Tommy took off towards first. Kathy and Mike C. ran to second and third. TJ behind the plate was clueless. My dad ran in and got the ball, turned around and looked at Mike C. creeping off third and teasing about coming to home plate. My dad was having none of it. Stay there, he said. Third Streeters were pissed. No bunting was allowed, they cried. My father and Mr. Tidwell convened on the mound. We were all yelling at each other's team while we waited the decision. It was chaos. Mr. Tidwell, being the umpire now that he was not pitching, announced the call. Bunting is certainly a legal hit in baseball. We never stated directly there was no bunting in this game. However, it is common practice when we play with all-time pitchers that no bunting is allowed. But since we did not call it specifically for this game and series, bunting is and will be allowed for the rest of the series. So both teams better be prepared. The base is awarded, bases loaded, no outs. Let's play ball. We went wild. There is absolutely no reaction from Bobby Donlin, but he had a new grit about him now. We now had the bases loaded with no men out. The game was ours. Lee Harvey was now up for us. We were all in a frenzy, screaming at Lee to get a hit. The third streeters were yelling at Lee, swing batter, swing batter. Mike C., Kathy, and Tommy were feeling giddy, leading off the bases. Lee, to his credit, remained calm. He was slowing things down for himself. He stepped out of the box, called time. He bent down and put some dirt in his hands, rubbed his hands together with the dirt, then took his hands and ran the dirt, for some reason, through his buzz-cut hair, gritted his teeth, pushed up his big black glasses onto his nose. He nodded to my dad that he was ready. My dad gave a straight fastball, not too fast, right down the middle. Lee swung through it and missed badly. My dad threw the second ball the same way, and Lee swung the same way, and he missed it again. 2 strikes. My dad wound up and gave him this one a little higher and a little softer. Lee relaxed, moved the bat back, and swung for all of his might at that big ball. He connected hard, a hot line drive right to Big June at first base. In a split second, she raised her glove, and to hers and our surprise, the ball went right in it. Lee was out. June just happened to be standing on first base when she caught it. Tommy had been leading towards second and was almost halfway there. Mr. Tidwell yelled, "Tommy is out at first." He did not tag the base before he went to second on the ball that was caught. Bobby at third quickly thought about this and looked at Mike C. halfway towards home base. He yelled at June to throw the ball to him. June heard him and chucked the ball over to Bobby. Huge Gene was pissed. He saw what was going on and yelled at Mike C. to get back to third. Mike C. ran as fast as he could towards third. The ball was on its way from June to Bobby. The ball got there first. "You're out," yelled my father. "Triple play," said Mr. Tidwell. "The third streeters win. The third streeters win." Wow. In one swing of the bat, we went from bases loaded, no outs, to losing the game, 1-0. How in the heck did that happen? We had lost the first game of the World Series in our own backyard with our own father's pitching. What the heck? This to us was the end of the world. It's a good thing it was late in time to go in. We did not have long to suffer. Game 2 was scheduled for tomorrow afternoon at 2, and that was probably the best thing for us, not to have to go a whole week or day with the third streeters giving us crap. And that was the end of Chapter 7 for the book My Bicentennial Year, Adventures in Gansevoort, New York in 1975. Back in a minute. Thank you. Who is the socialist? He is the man that is spiritual. He's the man that seeks consensus. He's subjective, petty, and small, taking everything in life personally. He's outrageous, boring, and rude. He pretends to be a leader and a change agent. He pretends that he's your friend. He is sly, cunning, and deceptive. He dresses, acts, and speaks like a slob. He is informal and terminally unique. He is childish and pretends that he knows nothing. He has no conscience and pretends that might makes right and that the ends justify the means. He is impulsive and rationalizes his behavior. He is deterministic, blaming others for his mistakes. He is skeptical, demanding that others solve his problems. His unreasonableness and irresponsibility make him a bad role model, bad father, brother, family member, friend, and a bad person, period. So if you think that you can be friends with a socialist, think again. Thank you. This is Ron, your host, the only true conservative in the United States today, bidding adios to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there, and reminding you to tune in to the John and Ken Show, which is an excellent example of how true conservatives communicate. It's a radio show that's on KFI AM 640 from 2 o'clock in the afternoon to 6 o'clock in the evening, Monday through Friday. And that's Pacific time. So that's an excellent show to listen to. And other than that, until next time, remember to be honest, to be smart, to be beautiful, and to remember that the left has no authority, no power, and they can't win.